Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to be with you here on Psychic Stories, where we just kind of get together with people who have really psychic experiences and share all about what that's like. Today, we have such a wonderful person and a good friend of mine, Stephanie James. Stephanie's an author, transformational coach, a psychotherapist. She's got a beautiful podcast. She's a filmmaker. She's sort of all around doing all the things that open to people the deep transformation and change. She's got a beautiful podcast called Igniting the Spark and a book called Becoming Fierce. She's working on another book that I'm sure we'll all see very soon. I'm convinced it's going to hit some bestseller lists. But thank you so much for being with us today on the podcast, Stephanie.
Yeah, it's always such a joy to be with you, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I just love talking to other psychics. And I know you don't consider yourself a psychic. It's not in your bio or anything, but I know you to be extremely psychic. And and that a lot of the really pivotal moments in your life have kind of arisen out of these amazing psychic experiences. And I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit with us what that's been like for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say that because I think that, what's lovely is that the word psychic is becoming more and more and more mainstream. My daughters and I were laughing. We had dinner together Friday night, and they were like, you have so many friends that are psychics. You're always saying, I talked to my psychic friend or my psychic friend. And they're like, that's a lot of psychics. And the truth is, now it's becoming less taboo. It's becoming more mainstream because we all have these abilities. Everybody does. It's just, as you know, developing them.
Right.
And so while I wouldn't have listed myself as a quote unquote psychic, definitely some of the life changing moments in my life resulted from listening to what I would have said was deep intuition,
Mm,
or the divine coming through. But I think that's also what being psychic is.
yeah.
Right? It's that listening when that strong message shows up. And I guess just to share with you, one of the really strong hits for me happened, gosh, 25, 27 years ago. And I was living in Denver, Colorado. And at the time, I didn't have my graduate degree yet. And I was working as a mental health therapist at an adolescent psych unit at the
Wow.
care unit. Yeah. I mean, it was hardcore lockdown residential. And this is before the days of managed care. So, like,
Mm,
those kids lived with us. We had them for like 7 to 9 months, literally till their insurance ran out. And so I was so blessed because I was the only person that was non-master's level at the time on the therapy team. So it was a great honor. I worked with great girlfriends. Like, we literally had so much fun. If we weren't seeing kids, we were in our office just like laughing our butts off and joking around with each other. And it was this awesome experience. So fast forward to the second year I was living there. I remember the date profoundly, because it was January 14th. And I had spent the weekend with literally a group of friends. I had 13 friends and myself that went up to my aunt's. She had a second home that was in Eagle Vale. And it slept 16 people comfortably. It was this huge, gorgeous home. We're all there having the best time skiing, going to the top of the mountain, going ice skating, having margaritas. It was just this lovely time. And the last night we were there, so it would have been a Saturday night. I told my friend Elle, who I was sharing a room with, as we got to bed, I said, God, I am just feeling so overwhelmed. I mean, suddenly out of the blue,
wow.
and started having tears. Here we'd had the best weekend ever. And she's like, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. I said, I have the strongest feeling I have to leave Denver. I need to move back to Fort Collins, which is
Wow.
a town that's about 60 miles north of Denver that I grew up in. And she's like, why? Like, you have everything you want. You've got a great career, you've got all your friends. What would make you do that? And I said, I have no idea, but it is so strong. Like, I have to do this. And the next day I called my mom and I said, I need to let you know because my lease at the apartment I had in Denver was up the 1st of February. And so I
Mm.
said, I'm going to go back to work tomorrow and give them my 2 weeks notice, and I am not going to renew my lease. So the first thing, which was the hit of all this being, synchronicity, is my mom says, well, this is interesting because our renter just said he is not going to renew his lease. So they had a second home in Fort Collins, and she said, that home's available February
Wow.
1st if you want to move in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, that would be perfect. Again, nothing's wrong in my world. Everything's great, but I just have this very, very strong feeling. So I go to work on Monday. I tell them, I'm not going to stay here, 2 weeks notice, don't renew my lease, move back to Fort Collins. And 3 weeks to the day of moving back, I get this message from one of my girlfriends that worked on the psychiatric unit. And she's like, you've got to see the front page of the Rocky Mountain newspaper. And I'm like, what? And she's like, we have all been laid off and the adolescent unit has been closed down. Everything was shut down. And it was the front page of the Rocky Mountain News. And it said
Wow.
psychiatric abuses charged because we had scouts that were going all over the place around the nation at the time, bringing kids in for treatment. And then they would receive a $5,000 kickback, which is illegal, unbeknownst
Wow.
to all of us, of course.
Wow.
So if I would have stayed, if I would not have listened, I was a single mom. I would have signed a year contract. I wouldn't have had a job. I mean, the stress and it would have been so stressful. And that adolescent unit never reopened.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so it was
Wow.
like, it wasn't like people were just laid off for a few weeks.
Mm.
They had to choose new career paths. Instead, I came here within the first week I was here. I had a job with a place I had interned at during my undergrad. I mean, everything was just serendipitous. So that would be one of my
Gosh, that's
first
so cool.
powerful
Um,
experiences of that life-changing
I love.
force.
And did you now, Stephanie, when you that's first of all, that's amazing. Sometimes the stories aren't that positive. Like they're like the warning ones, you know? So I love that that was sort of getting you out of the way of danger. And I'm so curious, like when you get that message, is it a feeling? It sounds like it sort of came over you like a feeling. Or were you hearing it? Like what was the experience like?
I feel like when that stuff happens to me, it is, yes, I get very strong feelings, but also there's times where it's like this inner knowingness.
Mm,
Not like I hear a voice in my head, like I'm hearing voices, but there really is like this inner message that's very clear.
yeah.
And I would say to you, that's the same message I got 6 years ago when I got done meditating. And literally, the inner voice said, you need to, some of the most brilliant minds and serving hearts on the planet because of my podcast, and you need to make this film. And like, literally, again, it would have seemed absurd. Again, still single mom, had 67 cents at the time in my savings account. And as that first film became this, incredible reality, this documentary, and is on Humanity's Stream playing right now.
Yeah.
It's just been phenomenal that way.
You really like made some miracles happen, you know, that I think kind of uh, on a wing and a prayer, kind of manifesting as you go. Like that's how I see you do things. And I'm sure that your intuition is a big part of what's guiding you through that process.
100%, and I think that's the importance for all of us of making sure we stop,
Mhm.
pause so that we can listen to that still small voice,
Yeah.
because that night in Vale, I was getting ready for bed when that came over me. I was finally quiet. It was like all the activities, all the things we were doing had finally calmed down. And it was like the moment I kind of dropped into my heart and I was there and I was present, boom,
Hmm.
there was the message.
And do you have a meditation practice or do you do something regularly in your life to sort of cultivate those states?
I do. So, I've meditated for 26 years and it's taken different forms. The last 3.5 years, I've been doing this. I love it. It's like pranayama breath work where
Mm,
you go through your chakras and you're just like sitting in the energy of that, bringing divine light through, really feeling that connection and just sitting in that connection. And so I feel really blessed. I worked with a group out of Seattle once a week on Tuesday nights, for 90 minutes a
wow.
hit, and took a lot of classes through that group that really helped, I think, inform my practice even more and has opened up a lot more to me
Mhm.
than even before, as far as having those kind of psychic and then like amazingly, as you know, serendipitous experiences.
Yeah, that's so cool. Mine haven't been as fun as that. Some of them haven't. I remember like it was years ago, 20 years ago, and my kids were super little. They were a year and 3 years and 5 years old. And I woke up in the middle of the night. I was having some trouble in my marriage. Like we were, it was rocky. But one night I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this voice in my head, like somebody was speaking into my ear with a megaphone. You know what I mean? Like that one. And I like sat like bolt up in bed. I was like, you know, and I could hear it. And, like you're not sure if it's a dream or it's real, like that, because you're sleeping. It's kind of that thing. But I was like looking around for the person in the room who said that. It was like that. I was so sure it was real. And the voice said, "You're going to get ready because you're going to get divorced now."
Mm.
And I was like, no, because I didn't want to get divorced. And who wants to get divorced? But, my kids were so little and um, I believed it on one level and didn't believe it on another level. So I believed it like, okay, what do I have to do to get ready for this? And um, and then I was like, try everything, like couples therapy and marriage encounter weekends and all the things that we try. And like 2 years go by, and then finally there we are. And the next thing that sort of happened was, um, I was like sort of like praying, I don't know, talking to God, talking to my guides. I'm like, okay, if I have to do this, I just don't want to have to do it on my own. Like, I need help. I really send me some ground support. And literally, and I felt it like, and I felt the sort of reassurance, like, okay, we've got you. We've got you. And I came up out of that meditation because the phone was ringing, and it was my friend. He was like, "You're not going to believe this, but um, my husband just left. I needed a place to live with my kids." So my friend moved into my house, and we had 5 kids, like around 5 years old, under five, and we lived together for a long time. While our kids were growing up, she was like the best housemate ever, and it was really like, um, it was sort of, it's a difficult thing to go through. But I knew that it was going to happen, and I felt like that prepped me. And then I knew I was going to get help, and then I was going to be okay. Like I was going to be okay because ground support was coming, and that is probably one of my. There was like no mistaking that. It was so clear.
That's so awesome. I mean, I love, not awesome that you had to go through the pain and through that process, but that
Yeah.
you had that assurance. And then in some ways, the situation turned out unbelievably
Did
wonderful for all of you.
I know? I know. It turned out I had this big old house and everything. I'm like, what am I gonna do with this big house? And then my friend who moved in, she was a pediatric nurse. I'm like, what could be better? Like it was as difficult as it was sort of like the best, sort of like you were saying, it was the best path out of a difficult situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the things that we do, Stephanie, that block our intuition? Because I know like
Mm.
sometimes we get in an argument with ourselves. Like our minds come in, our ego selves come in, and especially when the guidance is a little off the beaten track, like what do we do? Has that ever happened to you? And or what do you think we should do when that happens?
Well, I feel like number one, the thing that I know gets in my way, and I think I've talked to lots of my clients and different people who and friends who share this as well. But it's when I want what I want to happen,
Yeah.
and so it's like I am pushing my will, and I'm just like even if I'm just like praying, like, oh, God, please, 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 which is not the right prayer, right? I mean, it's like, it's nothing's going to happen with that kind of energy. And so it's truly those moments. I mean, at times, and it's not all pleasant. Like my life isn't all cheery and everything wonderful and rosy for sure. And in my lifetime, it's been those moments when I've literally hit my knees. Like
Yeah.
I'm just so overwhelmed with life or whatever's happening. And I just have no choice almost. It's like I get out of my
Right.
head and just go,
So those moments
I
you surrender, right?
surrender,
You surrender. Yes.
total surrender. And,
Mhm.
and it's become truly the daily practice for me.
Mhm.
Before I even get out of bed, I have a hand on my heart, a hand on my gut, and I'm just surrendering everything in my life. And I'll kind of go through a body scan and just think of, is there any piece I am not surrendering? Because I totally have been like, okay, I'm going to surrender everything, but I really want to hold on to this relationship,
I know. Just
even if it's
remember the
not the
people of
perfect
that.
one for me. And of course, inevitably it doesn't turn out well. So it's got to be that right complete surrender and
Yeah.
like the divine has our back. You call it the universe or the divine, whatever your higher power is. But our guides, these powers are there to help us and guide us through. So I
Yeah.
think that's probably the biggest thing, Lisa, I would say, to get out
Uh-huh.
of our own way.
Yeah. It's like my will versus thy will, right? And I don't know, I'm such a willful person. Like I have like, I'm like, no, like that, I wanted to go the way I wanted to go, but you're right. Like that, who's gonna win that argument? It's universal will, God's will, every single time. And I think in a way that's a good thing because for me, like I know whether you think it's your higher self or your spirit guides or divine God, whatever, it aims so much higher than we do, like sees the pattern and sort of knows because I think for me, my personal will doesn't set the bar very high. So I just want a nice, comfortable. I just want to be comfortable. I just want to like what's give me the easiest path, and that's not the best path. The our higher self is always like leveling up the bar. So yeah, that's really good advice. I love that surrender process. It's so hard to do.
Well, it is. And especially I think, Lisa, too, like when we're manifestors. And so we're like, well, I can create these amazing things in my life through the power of intention. Yes,
Yeah.
but the secret sauce to the power of intention is letting go.
Yes.
Like I can remember driving to grad school. I lived in Fort Collins, but of course I'd moved back to Fort Collins and then got in grad school at DU. So I would drive back to Denver a few days a week to go to school, which was fine. But on the way, this is going to date me. So this is like 1993. And I'm listening to Deepak Chopra's Higher Power on a
Mm.
cassette player in my little CRX. and, but I remember, I mean, it stuck with me all these years that the powerful piece of having a desire and creating things in your life, he said, have the desire, but let go of the outcome.
Right.
And that really has been true for me in my life over and over and over again. That's when we surrender. That's when we say, okay, you're right, Lisa. It's a mind, if you will, or a power bigger than us than we could ever even imagine. Universal mind is so much more expansive than we could ever imagine. So
Mm.
it is, it's like, yeah, this is my desire. This is my dream. And I'm going to hand it over to you because I'm pretty sure you've got a bigger scope,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's where the psychic comes in too, because I don't think our minds can't really get that. The ego and the mind, those parts of us can't receive that download. I think if we want to get those directions, we have to be more in our feelings from the heart or from the gut, that we get that direction. And our minds will be like, well, that doesn't make sense, and that's not logical, and that's not what my parents told me to do, or what the world thinks I should do. We get have to let go of the arguments that we have, around whatever is coming down from spirit.
absolutely.
So cool. I love that. So I know you're cooking on it. Let's do one more story. I know you're cooking a new book. It's amazing. I read it and it's so psychic. So many incredibly psychic things happen to you. Kismet and synchronicity and that. Is there one that you want to share with us from that story?
Um, so yeah, I mean, just to preface it, the way that this book began, as you know, was one of those serendipitous, like, holy crap, there's no way I could have orchestrated this in a million lifetimes. That I'm interviewing Neil Donald Walsh on my podcast, and we don't get to the interview for 30 minutes. We're just like having this heart to heart resonance, this conversation where we're sharing all these personal stories and just laughing. And it was just really beautiful. And at one point, and it's awesome because I have this on tape so I can rewatch it. I've watched it a couple times. You see him drop in, he was getting the psychic hit, he gets the
Oh,
intuition, and he says, Stephanie, you're going to write a new book and you're going to start tomorrow morning. And the title of this book is I'm Dying to Tell You About Death. And it's going to have a global impact. And I'm going to endorse your book. And I mean, it was like, it was so phenomenal. It's like this experience in the last 4 or 5 months has been like some of the greatest experiences I've ever had, because as you know, I chatted with you and interviewed you for the book as well, because I just love it. It was not things I would have necessarily shared. So, wow, talking about going out of my own comfort zone as far as like, okay, world, I'm going to share with you all the psychic experience and all this knowingness that I've had since I was a little girl. I start that book, and the book is really about how we conquer our fear of death. The secondary title is Transforming Fear to Embrace the Divine Journey of Your Life.
right.
And so it really is, I spoke about being 5 years old, and I have a vivid memory of exactly where I was standing, looking at my grandmother's antique dresser. I remember what the carpet looked like downstairs at my mom's house, and having the really direct thought of like, oh, I can't remember being born, and I don't remember ever dying before, because it's just one continuous thing. It's like we're never really born and we never die. I mean, and at 5 years old, to have that awareness and to hold on to it, a lot of times we'll have those knowings when we're little like that, but we kind of, the veil comes down, and when we don't remember that stuff later.
Beautiful.
But that was really the beginning. And as you know, I mean, experiences just started happening, really from that point on that I was aware of. So I don't know. Is there one, Lisa, to you that stands out? I can't remember what might.
I mean, I think the whole story about how it got started was what I was thinking, like how, um, I mean, it feels to me like you channeled that book too.
Oh,
Like that it was like one massive psychic download, the whole thing.
oh my gosh. Thank you. Yes. Thanks for sharing that, because that is what is crazy. My first two books took 9 months each. It was like birthing a baby. It was like I felt like I was pregnant. And then, the books came out. And this book downloaded like nothing I've ever experienced. It was done in a little after 6 weeks.
Wow.
Um, you know, you introduced me to Lisa Hagen, who is our joint literary agent, and we signed the contract that day. And now some really big publishing houses are interested in it. And what I love too is within that 6 week period, people were just coming out of the woodwork to be a part of that book. Like
Yeah.
Wayne Dyer's daughter Sage and his wife Marceline, Ariel Ford, Stephen Simon, who has the Academy Award winning film What Dreams May Come with Robin
Right.
Williams and Cuba
Wow.
Gooding Jr.
Um,
I mean, it has been miraculous. I mean, it was just like, okay, when you're in alignment and you surrender to the process, some days that psychic sense that, or I would have called it that, the intuition, the download would say, okay, it's 4:30, you're waking up. And I would show up and just write for 3 hours. That's not a normal process, right? It was beyond me. It was greater than me. And the joy of, you know, writing that book, it was, yeah, it absolutely was channeled. It was not me.
it's so amazing. And I had the pleasure of reading the advanced copy, reader's copy. So I know it's gonna be, I know it's gonna change the world. It's gonna be really huge. So I'm
Oh,
so
thank
excited.
you.
Can't wait to see what it's gonna do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for spending this time with us today, talking about all your amazing psychic experiences. And where can people find you, Stephanie, when if they want to look more into your stuff?
Yeah, they can go to stephaniejames.world. So stephaniejames.world. And I mean, my books, my film, you can see a trailer to my first film, my events, all the stuff is there. So yeah, and I have a YouTube channel as well. So if you go to Stephanie the Spark, you can find it. And I'm so thrilled you're doing this, Lisa, because this is such a necessary next step in our evolution of consciousness and to continue to normalize this because we all have this, right? We
Right.
all have this gift. And so often it's underdeveloped. And so that's why books like yours, Awakening Your Psychic Ability, it's so important. So, gosh, I just thank you so much, Lisa. You're such a bright light in this world.
Oh, thank you so much. That's awesome. And thanks all of you guys for joining us in this amazing conversation. And we'll be back again soon.